We saw back in March what happened in Guinea, where there were a lot of people cried foul. Same thing in Mali. Let me ask you though, because we don't know how long this pandemic's going to be around. There are big elections in places like Ivory Coast, Guinea, Ghana before the end of the year. What do you do?
I think it's a very tough decision. To some extent, you're damned if you do and damned if you don't. And I think the Guinea elections, particularly the context of those elections, essentially approving a referendum on a new constitution, which was to give the incumbent leader, Alpha Conde, another term in office. In fact, several more terms in office if he chooses to exercise those rights that the new constitution has given him. And as you say, you've got very important elections coming up in sort of two of the biggest economies in West Africa, Cote d'Ivoire and Ghana. And I see already on the eastern side of the continent, President Museveni has said it would be absolutely crazy to have presidential elections during a coronavirus pandemic. So he's already stated his case, and his elections aren't even due till next year. So it does raise some difficult cases, and there's a constitutional issue. I mean, in Ethiopia, the opposition are saying that the Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed has railroaded through a new law in Parliament with using his parliamentary majority to extend his tenure past August, when there were due to be held elections. So I think the only way to make this work, I think, is there's got to be a real working consensus between the ruling parties and the opposition parties that if, for public health reasons, for the very good public health reasons of not running big political campaigns where hundreds of thousands of people gather and interact with each other and sort of contradict the social distancing rules, if it's decided that they should jointly then agree on a new schedule when the public health risks can be diminished. But it would mean the ruling parties have to have the confidence of their opponents and decide on a new timetable if it's going to have legitimacy.
Comfort Error, let me ask you, because has your research found what Patrick is describing, that rulers with a more authoritarian bend are cherry picking where they so desire, so that this crisis fits their needs?
Absolutely. I mean, I think Patrick described it very well, and I'm glad you extended it to other parts of the continent. Patrick, I would have added Burundi to your list as well, which is going to elections next year, but closer to, next week, sorry, but closer to home, you've got Burkina Faso also will be going to elections, and Niger, and again, with or without the COVID crisis, you already had tensions there between the opposition and the ruling party. You already had a very volatile situation in the country with security. I mean, I think this does play well, Francois, as you say, for some authoritarian leaders. For instance, Alpha Conde. He was able to resist the pressure from traditional Western countries, from the European Union, from the US and France, because he was backed by Russia, Russia issued a communique arguing that the vote that took place on the 22nd of March was not a bad vote. So the pressure on, by traditional partners for more democracy, more human rights, more good governance, is more and more difficult to maintain, because there are a multitude of choices now that African countries face in terms of how they want to spin the decision to hold or not to hold elections. I think the biggest test, to go back to what Patrick was going to say, is a transparency in the decision that is taken by leaders, is the ability for those leaders to consult and make sure that they bring the opposition on board. But it's not just the opposition, it's also bringing civil society on board. And in a context where you've got violence and where you've got jihadi attacks and attacks by other non-state armed groups as well, making sure that you've got an enabling environment for those elections to take place is going to be crucial as well. So, as I was saying, regardless of the COVID pandemic, we're already in environments that are very tense, that there's a lot of insecurity, and there was already a question mark about the ability to hold those elections in those societies